afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our live interview talking about building a future fit organization. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment. But in the meantime, a couple logistical things. First of all, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including digital strategy, software selection, and implementation. Which also includes, by the way, change management. And a big part of what we'll discuss here today is stuff related to change management. So thanks for joining here today. This is part of our live interview series that becomes part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast episodes. You can find Transformation Ground Control at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And at that website, you can find all the platforms where you can watch or listen or subscribe to the show. You can also view or listen to past episodes of the show at that website as well. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to learn more about the podcast. But by being here today, you're part of the live interview and part of the production of the show. So thank you for joining. Secondly, I'm going to have a few questions for our guests, but I'm hoping that the audience will sort of take over and ask a lot of the questions for me. That makes it a lot more exciting and interesting. So if you don't mind, just drop in the chat any questions you have along the way for our guest, who, just to give you a preview, is going to talk a lot about change management in people and future fitting and future proofing in organizations. So that's sort of the general theme that we'll set up here in a second. But if you have general questions about change management, anything related to people and change management, you've got the right person here in front of you to ask those questions. And one last thing before we get started, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat what city and country you're joining from today. I'm in North America today. My guest, who I'll introduce in a moment, is in Australia. So love to hear what city and country you're all joining from here today. So please drop that in the chat. So with that all being said, I'd like to introduce our guest, who is Friska Wirya, who is the founder of Fresh by Friska. Friska, thank you for being here today.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here as well. Second time now. So super excited.
Yes, you're becoming a veteran of this podcast. So thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
And actually what's interesting is I think after the last time you were on this podcast, very shortly after it, you published a book. And I think I knew you were writing a book, and I knew there was a book somewhere in discussion in your future. But then the book came out like pretty quickly after the interview. And the first thing I thought was, oh man, I wish I would have known that book, what was in the book. I could ask you some questions around
Yeah.
that. So it was a great excuse to have you back on where we could talk about the book. But before we start talking about the book, which is called Future Fit Organization, maybe you could tell us about yourself, Friska, which is your background and what you do.
Sure. I would say I've been obsessed with change for over a decade. So there's a few things that Fresh by Friska does. There's consulting, coaching, and facilitation. In terms of consulting, I help very large organizations accelerate their digital transformation, specializing in the engineering, technology, and mining industries. I also run a series of different workshops on many different topics, cross-cultural communication, influencing without authority, building change management capability, and I also speak on the topics of future fitness, etc. So there's a few different arms. I've been in change for a very long time, and since then I've worked all around the world in 6 of the 7 continents. So Antarctica is the only place that I have not worked in. So that's next on my to-do list. And it's usually, yes, I'm there to drive technological transformation, but really you can't get the most benefits from technology if you don't also change your culture. So you can't suddenly implement the best of breed, for example, AI tools, without cultivating a culture that's open to learning, innovation, and growth. So that's what keeps me busy in my day-to-day.
Yeah. What is it that attracted you to the human element or the human side of change?
I get bored really easily. And after my MBA, I cut my teeth in general management consulting. And I felt like every project was roughly the same. It really wasn't challenging me. And I was in LA for 4 years, and I came back to Australia. And when I came back, it was only then change management started to be recognized as a discipline. And it really intrigued me. It played to all my strengths, the communication, the developing trust and rapport, the engaging with people from all different walks of life, combined with the analytical ability. And I thought, I want to give this a try. And so I took a big gamble on myself. I took a 40% pay cut, and I started from nothing. I started as a lowly change analyst, and I just worked my way up with unwavering dedication and laser-like focus. I got all the bits of paper, so all the credentials, And since then, I've done all sorts of changes like mergers and acquisitions, global restructures, operating model redesigns, many, many technology implementations. And fast forward 7 years later, I was the youngest GM of change for a big gold mining company. And yeah, that's how it all started, because I was curious, I was
Mm,
bored, and I knew I'm the type of person that likes to do different things all the time. And it appealed to me because it's not a cookie cutter approach. Yes, you have frameworks and templates and models, but what works for company A is not going to work for company B, because they're completely different cultures and no two changes are ever the same.
right. Yeah, makes total sense. What is it that brought you from you're originally from Indonesia, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
What brought you from there to Australia? I know you said you like to travel and you've been all over the world, but what brought you to Australia? Just out of curiosity.
Civil unrest.
Mm,
So back in the 80s, it wasn't a very safe place to live. And my grandparents just wanted better opportunities for me,
mm.
and they decided to move to Australia.
Okay, so you
And they
grew up.
chose Australia. Yeah, grew up in Australia, chose Australia because it was the closest Western country to Indonesia. And we just
Okay,
kept on flying back and forth. Yeah.
interesting. Very cool.
Mm.
And that probably, I imagine, that influences your interest in world travel too, just having the kind of multinational experience at a young age. Um,
Yes.
so,
And
so
also because I've only ever my sweet spot is very large organizations, and they're usually highly multicultural and multinational. So I need to have a really strong sense of local cultures, traditions, etc.
yeah, yeah, and
Mm.
of course, traveling all over the world, living all over the world, I imagine, helps give you that credibility and understanding that a lot of us don't have. Um,
Yeah.
the name? What's the name of your book? And I hope it's called Future Fit Organization, right? Or the Future
Yes,
Fit
correct.
Organization. Okay,
Yep.
I want to make sure I got the title precisely
Yeah.
right. But what's the premise of the book, and what's this concept of future fit organizations? What does that mean, and kind of what's the premise of the book?
So as I said, I've spent years helping very large organizations, helping them adapt, helping them thrive, because this world is constantly changing. It's uncertain, disruption every week. And so they have to be agile, innovative, and be able to pivot quickly. I think quickly is the main word, to
Mm,
keep up with the pace that the world is changing. And when we consider, like I was reading a stat the other day, McKinsey says the pace of change today is 3,000 times more than the impact of the Industrial Revolution. That's
wow.
significant. So
Mm,
everything's happening at warp speed. Like, for example, the things you learn at university today, in 5 years, they'll probably be obsolete. So they'll probably be useless.
right.
So these statistics highlight how important it is to not be future proof, but to be future fit, to be ready, to be agile, to be resilient. And when things do change, instead of bouncing back from adversity or challenge, we bounce forward. We actually bounce forward better and stronger than we were before. So, this is what I mean by future fitness. It's exactly like physical fitness. It's about building that strength, that flexibility, that resilience that organizations need in the years to come.
Right, right. Now, this book was published, when was it, the fall or summer of last year,
It
or
was
mid to late fall?
September, yeah, late September last year.
Okay. And
Mm,
what's interesting timing of your book being published is that that comes out just a few months after ChatGPT, for example, sort of took the world by storm. And that's a great example of what you just said about the stat about 3,000 times faster change now than the Industrial Revolution. Um,
mm.
and that's a good context, or a good backdrop for the timing of the release of your book. But what I'm curious is, you alluded to this a second ago, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it. How is future fit different than the word future proof? And so, we're used to hearing that term future proof. A lot of software companies say, hey, if you want to future proof your business, you've got to invest in our software, and that'll make you future proof. How is that different, or that general concept different from future fit, and vice versa?
I actually don't think future proof is possible. I think you've got to be
I agree.
pretty damn very, very arrogant to think that you
Yeah.
can predict the future and put plans in place to mitigate whatever's coming. Like lots of different changes, like COVID, right?
Hmm.
Entire organizations, entire countries were caught off guard. Even those countries that have experienced similar pandemic style diseases, like Taiwan had the bird flu, Hong Kong had SARS, they were all still, oh my God, like deer in the headlights. Some things we simply cannot predict. It is impossible. So instead, we have to build the change resiliency muscles now so that whatever does come down the line, we're ready to evolve our pivot and pivot our business to minimize that impact.
Right. So it's more of a conditioning to be in a certain state versus
Conditioning, preparation,
yeah.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
defined. It's not suggesting that you are going to be able to bypass or avoid the future state or
You
protect yourself
cannot,
in the
but
future state, but you're ready for
correct.
it.
Correct. But you can have, for example, a change framework ready to go, a crisis change management plan, like all, processes documented. You can run, just like how schools do fire drills, you can run drills with your organization to make sure that their change muscles are actually strong enough to withstand whatever's coming down the line in the future.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear from the audience and their opinion on this whole future fit versus future proof concept. What are your thoughts on the terms? Is future proof a possibility? Can we be future proof? Is that a viable buzzword? Even though it is a buzzword, it doesn't mean it's viable. But I'd be curious to hear from the audience what they think on that too. But I like that. I like how, because at first, honestly, when I heard the title of the book, I was like, future fit. That's different. I'm used to hearing future proof,
Mm.
not future fit. So I think it's a smart move to sort of differentiate or clarify what that means versus future proof. Um, real quickly, I want to just say hello to one guest who
Sure.
from Saudi Arabia, Mohammed. Hello, thank you for being here. He's on
Oh,
YouTube.
hello.
Um,
Mm.
we've got people from all over the world, so thank you, Mohammed, for chiming in on where you're at. Again, if you haven't dropped in the chat where you're at, we always love to see what city and country people are at. It's a global community, so we love to hear where you're from. So if you don't mind, just drop in the chat where you're at, where you're from today. But you started to allude to this a moment ago, Friska. You started to talk about having a crisis management plan and some of the things you can do to become future fit. But what are some of the key components that make an organization fit for the future? Or how would you describe an organization that's future fit versus one that's not?
So one of my favorite quotes that I've put in the book is futurist Alvin Toffler. He said, "The illiterate of the future will not be those that cannot read or write, but those that cannot learn, relearn, and unlearn."
Hmm.
So I totally agree. A future fit organization is an organization that's continuously learning and unlearning. They're not carrying forward these unproductive, unhealthy mindsets, behaviors, processes, and policies. So, if we think future means at a later time, and fitness can be described as being suitable to fulfill that role or task, it means they are constantly reviewing what's working, what's not, and only bringing forward the best of the best. So, a future fit organization is an organization that has a fluid and flexible mindset and seeks out change over comfort. They
Hmm.
recognize that the performance of their tech stack is only limited by the power of their people stack. They hire for character instead of over indexing on capability. They look out for key traits such as openness to change, such as assuming positive intent. Why these two traits? Because they are the traits that bring transformation alive. They are what's going to get people willingly moving out of their comfort zones into their growth zones.
Hmm.
And they also start prioritizing, I don't like to call them soft skills, I call them critical skills, skills such as empathy, such as curiosity, such as the ability to engage with people from different cultures, because this is what's needed. It's about balance. Like STEM skills, obviously very important, but they are useless in isolation.
Right. That's interesting. Um, and so is it fair to say then that an organization that you walk into and consult to, I'm sure you've seen this, I imagine, but you walk into an organization and you hear a lot of people say, well, that's not the way we do things, or we've always done it this way. And that seems to be where they're grounded, is like, we've always done this for the last 10 or 20 years. We can't tell you why. We just
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
we don't want to change because we've always done it this way. Is that
yeah.
sort of
I,
the
ca- I
polar
call
opposite of what
them
you're
I call them the nostalgia seekers.
right?
They only see problems instead of potential opportunities for innovation and growth. And yes, those sort of people are very common. Yeah, and it's okay to have those sort of people, but if they make up the majority of your people stack, then you're in trouble, right? You need to balance that out with um, change makers, with people that are enthusiastic, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, that have a vision, that know kind of what's out there in terms of technology and innovation, and have a vision for how that particular solution could benefit the business.
Interesting.
What's rare is people that have that knowledge and awareness combined with being organizationally set up for success. And when I mean organizationally set up for success, I mean they have the right relationships, they have a solid sponsor, they have a strategy to execute whatever they're planning for this particular technology. Not just that, shock horror, they have a budget to actually execute the darn thing. And that's where I see a lot of organizations kind of fall over. They have a very clearly documented strategy, but then when it comes to the change management, because it's installing something is very different from implementing something. Installing something is easy, it's in. It doesn't mean you're getting any of the benefits. So to get proficiency, to get adoption, to get ultimate utilization, that's implementation. And suddenly there's never any budget left over. So I think that's why the rates of digital transformation are still, the success rates are still stubbornly, appallingly very low.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic where an organization sets a budget on what the priorities are for a project by starting with the software. I'm going to go shop for some technology. Let's say it's 10 million US dollars, 10 million US dollars. Okay. That's my starting point. Now I've got to figure out what to add on to that. And if at some point your board or your management team says, no, you're not going to add that much on, you're going to have to throttle back. And you're probably not going to cut back that 10 million. You're going to keep the 10 million in this example, but you're going to cut change management. You're going to cut, cultural change, some of the things you're talking about here, which is a really unhealthy, problematic mindset as far as human behavior, organizational behavior. So let's unpack the different dimensions and just make sure I'm sort of understanding or tracking with you on like the themes. So you have cultural change, which is sort of the mindset shift and the ability to learn and unlearn, like you said. There's the organizational structure is sort of what you're alluding to. Is that what you mean? Like how you organize and how you collaborate and how you have people working together. And
yes, it's not just having the right people with the right skills, but the right mix of people in both delivery teams. So you have that holistic perspective and you can see around corners more.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. There's a question here that's a little bit out of scope for this conversation, but I actually want to bring it back into scope and ask you a question here. It's sort of like more of a case study, really. And this is a question on YouTube. It says, what are the advantages to using AI in the manufacturing industry? And we don't necessarily need to go down that path just because we're more focused on future fit organizations. But I think there is a question sort of embedded in there that we could pull on a little bit here. And that is when you look at something like AI, and I think it's a good example of fast changing technology that can either overwhelm an organization so much so that they resist the potential adoption of AI, or they could, if they are a future fit organization, they're going to be a little bit more creative and open to how we use AI to make ourselves more effective as a team. So how would you, like, just at a high level, how would you take that use case here or that case study of like AI and a manufacturer that's, say, an old school manufacturer, and maybe they're struggling to figure out how to adapt to AI and get more value out of it? How does this future fit concept, how could it help them be better at leveraging technology like that?
So, first of all, that question is quite relevant to my experience in mining. So mining and manufacturing is very similar. They follow key processes, and like for mining, for example, it's digging, it's leaching, it's cleansing, it's all these different processes. And in my previous role at that gold mining company, AI was used a lot. Like that team actually had the largest AI team in terms of those big miners, and they improved many, many things. They improved safety, they improved throughput. So I'll give you an example. One of the pipelines to transport slurry, a mix of ore and water, would get blocked every 8 months, roughly. No one had any idea why, without fail. And, in those sort of sectors, one downtime event could be like $26 million down the drain. We're not talking like $100 mistake here. And AI was used to analyze data. So lots of different data, water temperature, pressure, humidity, etc., literally hundreds of thousands of bits of data. And from that, it developed a predictive algorithm of when this particular piece of equipment would go down, and therefore it allowed maintenance dollars. So AI can be used to either predict things or to optimize. Optimize things could be, when should I repair this thing? when should I take this off to ensure that throughput remains high? So those sort of things requires a lot of data to come to that, impossible for a human to do. And in this particular situation, if we were to think of the future fit concept and how manufacturing and other quite conservative industries could leverage this, is that again, if you want to be future fit, you need to learn new things. You can't keep on using the methods of yesterday and expect you'll be able to crack the problems of tomorrow. It just doesn't work that way. And so, you have to start. I'm a big believer in that any big change or transformation needs to start and be supported at the very top. So my first port of call would be to engage and get alignment among the senior leadership team on what AI can and will do for the business. Start small, so get a pilot off the ground, whet the appetite for change, right? You don't want to kind of intimidate them and say, hey, let's launch these 20 projects, give me $20 million to do this. Start small, execute ruthlessly, get the wins, whet the appetite for more change, and you'll see that other departments will start to be interested and follow suit. Because no one wants to look stupid, no one wants to fail. So start small, get an A+, and then replicate.
Right. So is becoming a future fit organization, is it a top down endeavor that starts with executives? Is it a bottoms up sort of grassroots sort of thing, or is it both?
I think it needs to be, it doesn't necessarily have to start at the top, but it definitely needs to have the support of the top. Because if it's grassroots, but they're not getting the airtime, they're not getting the budget, what's the point? People are not going to bother trying anymore.
Right. Yeah. And if the executives don't want you to be future fit necessarily, they're not going to invest in the things that are going to make you that way.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had for you that I was going to ask you later, but since we're on the topic, I'll ask it now. How can executives of organizations, you were talking about leadership a moment ago and how it's so important for the top to be supportive of this, but how can they, assuming that it is sort of more of a top down approach, or you have an executive or leadership team that wants to become more future fit, what are some of the first steps they can take to start to create that culture change and the moving the needle on becoming more future fit?
I would say they need to first role model it. Share the things that they're learning, share the things that they're unlearning. So once they do that, people will start to follow suit. Because at the end of the day, everybody looks to leaders to get an understanding of how are things done around here, what's valued, what are your objectives, what should I prioritize on. So if you want to change other people, the first port of call would be to change yourself. The second part would be to develop change leadership skills. So, what's the mindset to navigate uncertainty and change effectively? And you're not taught this in schools, you're not taught this in universities. So these sort of qualities include empathy, resilience, adaptability, and they have to be overlaid with really good engagement and communication skills. And in this hyper-connected world where really we are borderless, this will become more and more important. So those are my top two sort of first steps to start. Start with yourself, and then the others will follow.
Right, right. So that's a great overview or summary of what executives can be doing. Back to your example a moment ago of AI adoption and results within the mining client that you worked with. Here's a follow-up question from Mohammed on YouTube. He asks, is this the same as data mining? So that example you gave where AI was taking that
No,
massive data. Okay. How would you
no.
differentiate data mining from AI, even though it's a little bit outside of what we're talking about here, but still relevant?
Data mining is purely going into data to identify patterns. Whereas the example that I talked about, yes, there was a lot of data, but we then developed algorithms to not just get insights from it, but develop a set of recommendations of what to do.
Right. So it's a step more or a step further than just getting the data and accessing it and consolidating. It's adding the algorithm
Yeah,
and
people have this misconception. Like, an AI project is not cheap. Like, and it takes, it takes months, a lot of data to train the algorithm as well. So this is not like a $10,000 project. I think that's what a lot of people have misconception of, especially when it's projects of this scale as well. When $26 million is on the line, there's a lot of things you have to measure to identify patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Here's a question from Jordy on LinkedIn. I was wondering when someone on LinkedIn was going to comment. In fact, I just checked LinkedIn to see, like, is this not streaming to LinkedIn? Because I thought, because we weren't getting any questions, and usually we get a ton.
Yeah,
And I looked over and
yeah.
there's like 30 some people on it. And I was wondering when someone was going to comment on LinkedIn. So thank you, Jordy, for breaking the ice here. And he's a third stage team member too. So thanks for this question. This is a good one. But what are some examples of unlearning programs and actions that organizations can do? So when you talk about that learning, unlearning cycle, what do you mean? Like, how? Give us some examples of how organizations could do this or demonstrate it.
Okay, I can't remember what the company's called, but they are in Sweden. And every Friday they celebrate mistakes. So people share their mistakes, what they learned from it, and what they'll stop doing as a result of that. So if you're serious about the unlearning, it needs to be celebrated. It needs to be normalized. It needs to be discussed openly, just like your values. So that's an example of an organization that's bringing that unlearning concept to life, right? Because as adults, we're all weighed down by behaviors that no longer serve us. So extrapolate that with however many people are in an organization. Like, the people on this call, how often do you review your own behaviors and think, you know what, I shouldn't be doing that anymore. This is what I'm going to do to stop that. It probably very rarely will someone put their hand up and say, yeah, I do that all the time. So the same needs to happen in organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. So not being afraid of failure, but embracing and most importantly, just making sure you learn from it and incorporate those learnings into how you move forward.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, great question. Thanks, Jordy, for that. Keep the questions coming too on LinkedIn, and especially you, LinkedIn, because the LinkedIn crowd's tired. Maybe it's all people in the Americas that are late in the day and tired right now. But another question I had is why do some organizations have trouble? Well, let me back up. What percentage would you estimate if you, unless you have data with precise numbers, but if you had to estimate, what percentage of organizations do you think are truly future fit right now?
I do not have data with precise numbers. From what I'm observing through media, through my own client work, and that of my contacts, I'd say it's in the single digits.
Wow.
Mm.
So let's call it 90% plus are not future fit. Why? What's wrong with those other 90% plus? Why are they? Let's assume they all know that they want to
Yeah.
be future fit. Why aren't they, or why do they have trouble with that?
Knowing and doing are very different things. And starting something is easy. Anybody can start something, right? Start learning a language, start writing a book. But the person that has the grit to continue to actually finish, that's very rare. And it's the same with organizations. Future fitness, like any other fitness, just like physical fitness, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes consistency, it takes commitment to build. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. The discipline it takes, the reshuffling of priorities, the people you need to get on board to make a business case for it, especially if it's a large organization. Like that's a lot of effort. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of approvals, a lot of governance hurdles you need to go through, and so and also the short termism of people. So I've seen this a lot. Someone in the C-suite may be pushing some sort of agenda. They're passionate about this future fit concept. Suddenly there's a restructure, or they leave, or maybe they get fired, and then you have to start from ground zero again. So the larger organization, the more difficult. Also, there's still a misconception, a misguided belief that if someone is technically brilliant, then it doesn't matter if they're an asshole. And this is really wrong. Like, I've seen many organizations where one toxic person poisons the well for everybody else. Turnover so sky high. People resign. They take sick leave. They're on mental health leave. They exert only 10% effort. There are so many ways in which resistance manifests, but this is rarely tackled head on. And the nuclear option is very rarely exerted. And when I say nuclear option, I mean exiting that person from the business. People just keep putting up with it. And when people see that sort of behavior tolerated, they start checking out.
Yeah.
So how can you get them on board and excited about this concept of future fitness if they're seeing that happen in the hallways? And another reason why this future fitness is so difficult is because in the way people are incentivized and remunerated. especially C-suite. They're usually very short term. What are your this quarter's results? Profit, stock price, revenue. We don't balance this with longer term metrics or qualitative measures. So if they're not getting rewarded for putting their neck out to build this future fitness muscles, why would they want to do that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I don't know that it ever really occurred to me until you were saying it. But when you talk about the assholes, you look around and you know there's a bunch of assholes around you. That negative mentality, whether it's being an a-hole or whether it's being a sabotager, someone that's going to sabotage, someone who's really negative. Some of these negative connotations or these negative characteristics, those are the dominant characteristics oftentimes of an organization. It seems like those will win out over someone like, let's just say you're the person that's trying to be good, do the right thing for the organization.
Mm,
It seems like, if you have, if you get a certain tipping point, the well-intended people are going to lose out, and it's going to kind of reach this tipping point a little bit easier than it should for
mm,
organization. It's very interesting. It's actually a lesson I learned in my first consulting company. Just as a quick side story, that was my biggest single mistake I made with that company, was that I just hired based on qualifications. I was 32 years old at the time, and I knew there's a lot I didn't know, and I knew I needed a lot of smart people around me, people that were smarter than me, which I think that was the right intent. But then I would just disregard the fact that, like you said, oh, this person's kind of an asshole, but they're really smart, so I'm going to hire them anyway. They're really
mm.
good at what they do, so I'm going to hire them anyway. And then suddenly I look around, I'm like, wow, I've created a culture that is not healthy. And it was so
Yeah,
hard to change. I couldn't change the culture, and so I ended up leaving that company. But
yeah.
that's a good example or a good thread you're talking about here. I think it's really important for organizations to think about. Gets back to culture, of course, and how you build that culture of being future fit. You can't do it when you've got a bunch of people that are really negative or can't think outside the box or are stuck in the past.
Mm.
What'd you call them? The nostalgia, the
Nostalgia seekers.
the nostalgia seekers. If you have
Yeah.
even just a third of your company, if a third of your company is the nostalgia seekers, that 1/3 of the company is going to win out. They're going to
Mm.
override the other 2/3 just because it's a more powerful, um, sort of inertia or gravity that holds back an organization. Um, Here's a question from Paul on LinkedIn, or just more of a comment. He says, interesting perspective. We are all encouraged to continuously learn. Continuously unlearning is a very interesting idea. Greetings from Ireland. So thank you for joining from Ireland here
Thank you,
today,
Paul.
Paul, especially late in the day. It's late there in Ireland. So he must be having trouble sleeping right now. So thank you for joining. And that is a good point, though. He brings up a good point that I've never heard someone talk about this concept of unlearning. I've heard about people talk about like how you have to let go of the past, or
Yeah,
just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean we should do it in the future. But you're
yeah.
you're framing a little bit different, which I think is super effective.
Mm,
Yeah. What about so a lot of change involves technology initiatives. We've been talking, on and
yeah.
off about AI and other forms of technology, but how should we be treating these technology initiatives that a lot of us are going through? How should we be treating them differently as it relates to future fit organizations? So if we want to be future fit, how do we
Yep.
need to be different in terms of how we treat technology and technology transformations?
Okay, here's my top 3 tips. The first is cross-functional, cross-collaboration teams. So very often it's just the tech team that's leading it and they forget everybody else. And that means there's silos, that departments don't know what's going on when implementing technology initiatives. So if we have a different mix of individuals in those delivery teams with diverse skills and perspectives, then to work together towards common goals, then by default, this will encourage innovation, more creativity, and more problem solving, leading to more effective solutions. Number 2 is really having the tech stack in the middle of whatever technology initiatives that you're doing. So this means being user centric, really considering how they're experiencing things. So if we do that, most likely the needs, the preferences, and the pain points of the end users will be considered through research and feedback mechanisms. So that
Hmm.
very rarely happens. Usually, like I'm on one right now, which is a huge S4 HANA implementation, and the functional consultants just go ahead and deliver this, start building without considering, hey, we have to let people know about this. B, have we engaged them? C, do we know that the customizations, the compliance, and the legislation is considered when you're configuring this system? The answer would be no.
Hmm.
And these sorts of things would not happen if we involved different people earlier. So if we place the user, the person, in the center of technology initiatives, we can ensure that the solutions really will be fit for purpose. drive meaningful impact, and make sure it meets those needs. And last but not least, sounds counterintuitive, but don't be afraid to change your plan. So I'm all about iterations. I don't believe in huge, long-term, detailed plans because things change so fast now. So instead of clinging onto that rigidity, prioritize short feedback loops and continuous improvement cycles. So don't kill yourself trying to build a 6-month roadmap. Just think shorter cycles because market conditions change. You may get new customer feedback. There's new technologies, new versions. So don't be so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super interesting. Yeah. The continuous feedback loop. And the second thing you mentioned, I think is a really interesting one, because if I were to contrast what you just said about how, your S4HANA example, where the project is going forward and starting to build the technology without involving the right people. A lot
Mm,
of times, the organizational behavior is super interesting and fascinating to me, where so many organizations make the decision that, okay, we have decided to move forward with an S4HANA implementation. You get budgetary approval, management's on board, all that great stuff. And then it's sort of
mm,
like, we're so excited, we got to go. So let's go bring on the system integrator, and all the consultants come in and start building stuff. And then a lot of times, like you're saying, someone might say, well, wait, hold on. Why are we building stuff? What are we building? Do we even know what we're building?
mm.
What we're trying to accomplish here? Do we have the right people involved? But by then the freight train's already rolling. You've already
Yeah,
signed your contract with the
yeah.
system integrator. They've already deployed, 100 people on the project or whatever it is. And how do you break that cycle? Because it seems to be such a intuitive organizational behavior sort of thing. But I totally agree with what you said. But I'm not just denying it. I'm just saying, but the
Mm.
organizational dynamic runs counter to what you're suggesting. How do you change that mentality, or how do you convince an executive team, like, you can call it timeout and not start right now, and you should, and here's what you should do in the meantime to get ready for the implementation? What advice would you give?
Um, Honestly, it's not even the executive team, it's the system integrator themselves. Just because this is what their scope is, and by hell or high water they're going to deliver on that scope, they don't care about the people, they don't care about the change.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to remuneration, reward, and recognition. They're
Hmm.
rewarded, their definition of success is on time. This is my scope, the modules are built, the integrations are built, job done, pay my invoice. So I think it needs to start even earlier. And at that kickoff meeting, you have to agree the preconditions for success. And the preconditions for success, I don't know, it's different for every organization. It could be, input from A, B, and C sort, X number of people engaged, their opinions and considerations reflected in the design. So it's different for different projects, but I think, yeah, your description of it being a freight train is very, very accurate. I feel like I'm pulling back with all my might, saying stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, but by that time, momentum, it's like you're going downhill really fast. And there's at that point in time, all you can do is keep raising the risks at Steerco. Make sure you have a really good sponsor at that senior leadership team, so they are aware of the risks and they can influence their power, and they can exert their power to say stop, do this first.
Mm.
And they also have to be willing to say to the SI, okay, I know that's the timelines and the scope that we agreed on. Let's park that to the side now because this is important. There's no point having building a system on time if everyone hates it and it doesn't meet your regulatory and compliance requirements.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, yeah, some organizations with forward-thinking leadership teams and project teams will get that, especially ones that have already made the mistake that it sounds like your S/4HANA client is making.
Mm,
If they've already made the mistake, a lot of times we find it's a lot easier to get that message across, because they'll say, "Oh yeah, yeah, we did that last time and we screwed it up and we saw the
mm,
downstream consequences." But for an organization that hasn't made the mistake, or maybe they've unlearned the wrong thing here. They did do it 10 years ago. They did the same thing, but they forgot, or they just don't care to remember. Um, it seems like it's hard. It's easier to quantify what the impact is if I run over budget, or if my SI takes longer than what I have in the plan, or what I got approved
mm,
budgetarily. But if I don't build a future fit organization, that one's a little fuzzier. It's longer term. I can't quantify that the same way I can quantify what's right here in front of me, which is the system integrator's here, the meter's running.
mm.
I need to optimize the cost. So I don't know if you have a good answer for it, but it's like, how do you reconcile the thing that's right in front of you that you're worried about versus that longer term focus on future fit, um, capability building?
Well, for me, it's quite easy. So if we think of if we compare a future fit organization with someone that's unfit, so you just have to think of two different scenarios. Like if an organization is more future fit, is it likely that people will stay, for example, 12 months longer because they like the culture? The answer is
Yeah.
yes. If an organization is more future fit and they have really engaged, charismatic change leaders, does it make sense if a new joiner, if their time to productivity improves from, say, 3 months to 2 weeks? The answer is yes.
Right.
And does it make sense then if people love working in a future fit organization, they will refer other people to join and that will reduce your recruitment costs?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So if we use those three different metrics, say on a salary of, I don't know, $150,000 times 1,000 people, like that's real money.
Right.
It's real money. And if you don't have the right traits, the right mix of people in the delivery teams, does it make sense then? Is it likely that your projects will run over budget? The answer is yes, because communication shit, people don't trust each other, blah, blah, blah. So you just have to think of, you may not have the hard data available online to prove your case, but these are very likely scenarios. Like what I'm talking about, very conservative estimates and very likely conditions to occur if you invest in the future fitness of your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. And, you look at a digital transformation of some sort, and let's just say you have a budget set for the entire project. And let's just say you've been forward thinking enough to set aside 15 to 20% of that budget for change management, more the human side of stuff. And
Mm,
you think, okay, we're going to do this right. But then, you get into a bind and you have to cut the budget because your technical stuff is running over and you've got to cut something. The natural inclination is to say, well, what if I cut the change management budget in half and I save 10% of the entire budget?
mm.
That you could
Save.
right, right.
You either pay now or you pay more later. And when I
Exactly.
say pay more later, it'll take longer, it'll
Yeah.
be more painful. People might leave, right?
Yeah.
People are like, this quiet quitting thing, it's a thing. If they're
Yeah.
having a shit experience for the next 2 years because of your transformation, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
And the cost of them leaving and the cost of you rehiring and recruiting, far more than the saving you did by slashing change management.
Yeah. 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 And that's where I was going with it too, is like for every dollar you save by allegedly, saving money on change management, you're going to spend, I don't know what the number is, but if I had to estimate, I'd say at least 5 times as much, $5 for every dollar you save by cutting
Yeah,
change, you're probably going to add another $5 of longer term costs. Problem is though, if I'm a project manager, I'm not measured back to your point about numeration.
100%.
I'm not measured on that.
100%.
I'm measured on coming in on time on budget. So come hell or
Yeah,
high water, I'm finishing on time or on budget. If the downstream
yeah,
impact to our operations goes off the rails, that's
yeah,
not, I mean, that sucks, but that's not my personal problem because I'm
yeah,
not measured on that. So if you're an
yeah.
executive, you need to set the right targets. I guess that's where we're going with this, on. You've got to make
Yes.
sure people
Yeah.
are behaving the right way. And
And
sorry, rookie
and
mistake.
and
My phone is not
that,
silenced.
that's okay. And can I say that there are ways, if you truly need to cut the budget for change, there are ways to do that, smarter ways to do that. For example, ChatGPT. It does a lot of grunt work that an analyst would usually do. There's a lot of AI solutions you can use to make collateral development go faster, etc. So it's not always cut people. It could be increase the number of tools that the change management team has, so they can do more with what they have. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not as easy as, oh, slash it in half, goodbye half the people in the team.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if we rethink our approach to digital transformation and the way we budget, the way we resource, the way we define our plans. What if we started with the future fit slash change slash people side of it? That becomes the core, and then you say, okay, it's going to cost this much to go through the operational and the people transformation, and then whatever's
Mm,
left, you add technology on top of that. What if you flipped it and said, "Yeah, we're going to add technology more selectively and more strategically, but we're really going to focus our efforts on not S4 HANA in your example from before. It's not focused on S4 HANA. It's focused on people and operational transformation, and whatever's left,
mm,
we'll do the technology." Because I don't know about you, but I'd much rather see an organization implement a subpar technology or a more limited scope of technology, but do the change management, the human part of it really, really well, that organization is going to get a ton more value out of the transformation. They're probably going to be successful longer term.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of giving the newest generation iPhone to my grandmother. Like she'd use it as a doorstopper. Like it's
Right.
the same. It's the same with organizations. You don't need the best of the best breed of whatever tool you're implementing if there's a huge deficit in the skill set and the appetite of your people to use that. So you're not going to like fill that gap. Whereas if you say like what you to your words, maybe a breed technology, but your people stack is matching that, then you're going to get full adoption, full utilization. People are going to be happy about it. And you may actually get more benefits and save more money as well.
Yeah. And you know what else I just thought of? Not only that, but you know how nowadays every dollar you invest in technology is not just a dollar today, but it's a dollar every year into perpetuity plus escalation clauses. Whereas
Mm,
all this stuff investing in change management and the operational improvement, that's a one-time cost that goes away once you make it. So that's another benefit. You don't have that residual ongoing cost that's super high because you invested in all this
mm,
technology that you're not using.
mm,
So
100%.
but the problem that we have, back to numeration, the entire industry, the entire technology industry is built on paying people to sell software. They're not paying people to make companies successful in their transformation
Yeah.
initiatives. And that's a big
Yeah.
problem. I don't know how you fix it, but that's misalignment of goals is a big problem for sure.
Mm.
So what other advice would you have for organizations about to begin a digital or business transformation? If they want to think beyond just the traditional, let's do a tech implementation, and they truly want to transform, they truly want to become future fit, what sort of closing advice would you leave for them?
Um, Often the best ideas and innovations come from someone that's external to your industry. So I found this um, in we used to fund crowd hacking and crowdsourcing challenges, and people from medicine, people from nutrition would compete again to solve stubborn problems that were occurring in mining, and the winners were often someone outside of your industry. So create those moments of serendipity, find ways to cultivate environments where people can make unexpected connections. It's casual encounters, chance discoveries. So whether that's online or offline. Number two would be, if you want unconventional results, you need to get off the conventional path. So seek out diverse perspectives from different industries, emerging trends, and see what will work for your own organization. Lead with empathy. Like we talked about it before, prioritize the well-being and the experience of the people throughout your transformation journey. And if you do this, I swear to God, it's the smartest decision you will ever make. It'll be a lot less painful. It'll be a lot less cheaper at the end. And last but not least, get the right help. So, the number of rescue jobs I've been called into when they've tried to do it themselves, tried to save
Mhm.
money, use cheaper and inexperienced resources. Transformation doesn't happen by accident. Like it happens because it has commitment, expertise, discipline, grit, and shock horror resources. You really do need to resource it effectively. So leaving things up to chance, that doesn't work. Like if
Yeah.
it's something that you want, you need to plan for it, and you need a budget to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. We're seeing a lot more project rescue and recovery and expert witness stuff too. In fact, that's the majority of our revenue right now is coming from troubled projects, failed projects, expert witness
Mm,
projects. And that's, I guess good for us, but not good for us. I mean, that's not good for the industry. It's not good for our clients. And like you said, it's a lot more expensive to hire us or you to go fix a project than if you just would have hired us in the first place to get it right and avoid some of
yeah,
those pitfalls. Yeah.
yeah.
Very interesting. So your book, Future Fit Organization, where can people find it? What's the best place to order, especially for the international audience that's outside your market?
Yeah, the US is actually my second largest market. So you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. For people in Singapore, you can walk into Kinokuniya. For people in Sydney, you can walk into Title. And for people in Indonesia, it is stocked at Peri Plus bookstores in Jakarta and also through their online stores.
And speaking of the bookstore in Indonesia, just one last thing. It's a super interesting story about you that I really admire. Tell us how you got the book on the bookshelves in Indonesia, at least. And maybe you did the same thing in Australia and other parts too. But
Oh, okay. All of the bookstores that stock my book, it's because I approached them.
Yeah.
So I
I
guess
mean, just
if
old
you don't
school, simple
old school.
guerrilla marketing. Nothing fancy about it. No secret rocket
I
science.
lit I literally walked into the bookstore in Sydney and just introduced myself. As lo and behold, the owner was behind the table, and I said, "Look, this is just published. It got 3 best-selling categories in 2 days. I'm local, blah blah blah." And he's like, "Sure." And so it
Yeah.
was as easy as that. Um, Singapore, the same thing. I walked into Kinokuniya, into their flagship store, asked to speak to the person that was in charge of business and leadership. Unfortunately, they were not there because I walked in on a Saturday, was given an email, and I just, FYI, guys, if you're in change, you're a really good marketer.
Right. Good at sales.
And so I simply emailed them again, introduced myself. These are my credentials. This is my experience. This is how my book has performed. I'd love to see it in your bookstores. They replied less than 12 hours later, said we bought copies for all our stores. For Jakarta, I tried contacting them online. It was very hard to find a person responsible for this. Put it out to my network. I said, "Hey guys, anyone know who's the merchandiser at Perry Plus?" Someone from LinkedIn actually came back to me and said, "Yeah, my friend used to work there. He'll connect you." Great. Emailed the guy. Immediately said, "We're stocking it in all our bigger stores." So that's
Yeah.
how it happened. Yeah, there
So
was no, I don't have an agent. You're looking at
right, right.
it.
Well,
So it's in bookstores because I put it there.
when you first told me that, I was like, it sort of like hit me across the face. I was like, it's so simple. Like in today's day and age with digital marketing and all these fancy technologies, sometimes just something real simple and old school is effective. But what that means for you is since you want, assuming it sounds like you're trying to get global, you have global distribution, at least through Amazon, some other outlets, but it sounds like you're gonna have to visit a
Yes.
lot more countries and just go knock on more bookstore doors. That's a way to really get the
Well,
bricks and mortar distribution
yeah.
you're looking for.
Well, my second book is actually being published by Penguin Random House, so they are the ones that are going to get it. I don't have to do anything for my second book. They're the ones that'll get it in bookstores, into airports, etc. So that'll be out in August, September this year.
Oh, very cool. We'll have to have you on like as part of your promotional buildup
Yeah, I
to it.
know. My big book
And
tour.
right before you become super famous, New York Times bestseller, and then I can't afford you anymore on the podcast. So I have to get you one more time before then. So, all right, good to well, really appreciate you being here today, Friska. It was great to chat with you again, and I appreciate as always, all the insights you share and all the lessons you've shared with us here today.
You're welcome.
And
Thanks
thank
for
you, the
joining
audience.
in, everyone.
Yeah, thanks to the audience for joining in. If you know anyone that missed this conversation that might be interested, whatever platform you're watching on, please feel free to share it with your networks. That helps us out too. It gets this podcast out to more people, and certainly it gets value out to your networks as well. So I appreciate you sharing it, commenting, liking it, all that stuff. It does help the algorithm more than you probably may realize. So thank you for that. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. And take care.